This is another video responding to some of Shadid Lewis's arguments which he had brought to me some time back, and I hope to respond to some of these arguments. The first argument he brought was the subject of Isaiah 53:10, where it talks about seed, and it says the following: "Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand." Now, a classic argument he brought, and Eli Cohen has used a similar argument. Well, Jesus had disciples, he did not have descendants. But that wasn't the point I made to Shadid. I went with a different approach. There are two ways of approaching the Zerah issue. The first is found in 1 Corinthians 15, where Jesus is described as the second man, or sometimes some translations say the second Adam, but really they should say the second man. But we know it's talking about Adam and Jesus in the context. This is what it says in 1 Corinthians 15. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first Adam became a living being, the last Adam a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the supernatural. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we bore the image of the earthly man, so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. My whole point is that Jesus has spiritual descendants in the sense that he is the father of a new humanity, of a new human race. So as the second man, in that sense, he will have Zerah, spiritual descendants. And the word Zerah can be used metaphorically, as well as physically, depending on its context. The second argument is to go back to the Hebrew text, where Zerah isn't necessarily the suffering servant's seed, that the Hebrew text only says he will see seed. In fact, I have an audio recording, which I may post in the future, where Shamoun addresses this. Also, Nakdimon uses a similar argument in his rebuttals to Eli Cohen, which I will post in the description below. When I gave the Zerah from 1 Corinthians argument, Shadid's straw man arguments, I dare say. Number one, he said, "Oh, well, Jesus said, if you do the will of the Father, you are my mother's brothers and sisters," which is not a refutation, and it is irrelevant to my whole point, and how Shadid thinks this refutes me, I don't know. And, of course, he went on to say, well, you don't say Jesus is the Father, you say he's the Son. But again, the Trinity was not relevant to the conversation, so that's another red herring and a straw man from Shadid. The next argument Shadid brought to the table, and this isn't a new argument, Assam Abdullah of Answering Christianity makes the same argument about Luke 24:44-48. Shamoun, in response to Osama's allegation of forgery, quotes from David Stern's New Jewish Commentary and talks about the four methods of interpretation in first-century Judaism. Peshet, simple. This method applies a literal approach in interpreting scripture. Drash or midrash, search, an allegorical approach to interpreting scripture. Remez, hint. This approach seeks to find a word, phrase, or other element in the text that provides hints for a specific event. Sod, secret. This applies a mystical or hidden meaning to scripture. Now, one of the ways Shadid dismissed it was by saying, well, it's not saying it's the interpretation of scripture, he's saying it is written in the scripture. It's amazing, because he doesn't seem to chastise Jews for believing in the Akedah, which talks about the binding of Isaac, and that even though Isaac didn't die, it's still counted as a sacrifice. And that's going beyond what, and that's not written in the text. So I wonder why Shadid isn't chastising the Akedah, or those who wrote the Akedah. There are two videos on my YouTube account where I speak about Zerubbabel and the signet ring, and of course the curse of Jeconiah, and addressing part of Shadid's arguments, so I needn't deal with them in this video here. you can watch the videos for yourself on my account. One argument Shadid Lewis brought to the table again was the subject of Genesis 38, and his contention was Jesus having, and I quote, bastard children in his family tree. Shadid did actually say that. He had a problem with the incestuous rape of Tamar, and the fact that Phares was included in Jesus' family tree. And then he appeals to Deuteronomy to say, Deuteronomy 23:2, where it says, "No one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation." Meaning that, they can't enter forever, period. End of discussion. Problem. And Shadid really didn't have a meaningful response to this, in my view. This law in Deuteronomy was written it wasn't written before Judah, it was written after Judah and Tamar and Phares. So this law does not impact them because their marriage happened before the law of Moses was even put into play. So Shadid's argument is a canard. It is unnecessary and unwarranted. And it doesn't, and again, if he wants to keep quoting it, it still doesn't help him because the law did not apply to Judah and Tamar because the law of Moses did not exist at that time. So no matter how much Shadid wants to appeal to that passage, it will not help him in any way, shape or form. Thus there's no detriment to Jesus there. If we were to go by Shadid's absurd logic that this law applied to Tamar and to Judah, then we would have to say that the whole tribe of Judah is cut off, and that would include Jesus being cut off. And I'm sure Shadid as a Muslim does not want to say that. So, Shadid, drop the argument. Shadid brought up an interesting point about David and Solomon being the criteria of the Messiah, and he tried to appealing to King Asa to prove his point. This is incorrect, and Shadid shoots himself in the foot, because David is the one who is used as the measuring stick for all the kings of Judah, not Solomon. Nakdimon has provided an excellent response to one Muslim who objected to him using the Tenach to prove that Jesus is the Messiah, which Nakdimon thoroughly dealt with by the grace of Jesus, and I'm glad he managed to do it. So I recommend checking that out also with regards to the David and Solomon argument. One thing I'll bring to the table about Jeconiah is that in one of the videos I uploaded where Sam addresses this, he mentions that the promises of God are conditional unless stated otherwise. For example, Jeremiah 18:5-10. Then the word of the Lord came to me. He said, "Can I not do with you, Israel, as this potter does, declares the Lord? Like clay in the hand of a potter, so you are in my hand, Israel. If at any time I announce that a nation or a kingdom is to be uprooted, torn down, and destroyed, and if that nation I warned repents of its evil, then I will relent and not inflict disaster on it that I had planned. And if at any time I announce that a nation or a kingdom is to be built up and planted, and if it does evil in my sight and does not obey me, then I will reconsider the good I intended to do for it." Notice, and there's more detail in the video which I can provide in the description below. These are some of the arguments that Shadid Lewis brought to the table, and I hope that this video has satisfied anyone watching this. Thanks for watching.